Hey guys, so today I'm going to be talking about this concept of neurosculpting and how we can use it to create internal happiness. So, what is neurosculpting? Neurosculpting is essentially changing what is going on in our brain by being consciously aware of our sympathetic nervous system responses or our parasympathetic nervous system responses to our external stimulus, and then sorry, I got a text message. And then making conscious decisions to change the patterns within our brain. So how do we do that? So to start off, there are three different types of happiness. So you have primal happiness, which we get from animalistic things. We get that from foods that we eat, engaging in sexual activities, things that would make us happy in the wild if we were just animals. So those are our primal happiness. Then we have love. Love is the second type of happiness, and we get that, when you're in love, you're so happy and everything is so wonderful. And the third is internal happiness. And internal happiness is something that we carry with ourselves regardless of our external environment. So no matter what is going on, this is our internal happiness. And this internal happiness is what we're going to work on with neurosculpting, because essentially to be internally happy does take practice, awareness, and positive decision making. And sometimes it can be uncomfortable because you're fighting your body's natural responses to situations. But it is doable. There is a wonderful quote that I wrote down that I feel like is great for this. So I'm just going to read it really quick. And it says, "If you can't choose happiness over fear, it's not because you are broken. It is because you are wired efficiently." Okay, and this whole idea of neurosculpting, and that quote is from a woman named Lisa Wimberger. She has her PhD and she studies neurosculpting. So I love reading her work. I think she's wonderful, and I've listened to a lot of her talks and things like that. So I encourage you all to do that if this is something you find interesting. But I'm going to break it down a little simpler and kind of what I've gotten from it. So moving forward into what is neurosculpting. So think of the brain. I wish I had a diagram right now. But it's okay. So you have a brain, right? In the middle of your brain is something called the midbrain and the limbic system. So in this midbrain and limbic system, this is where our sympathetic nervous system, all the neurons and everything come into our brain. And this is where we don't really have necessarily control. Like, there's no conscious decision making for this part of the brain. So this is activated. Say we are in a situation and something happens and we start to get anxiety and our heart starts racing. The midbrain controls your heartbeat, your breathing. And when it is stimulated by something, it could be a post-traumatic stress disorder reaction. It could just be, a general anxiety disorder. It could be an actual threat to us. The midbrain is the part of the brain that would make us choose, do we fight or flight? And that's the sympathetic nervous system coming into the midbrain. So these aren't conscious awareness decisions that we're making. It's our body's response to when we were in the wild and there was a tiger or something. Do we run or do we flee? We're not thinking about it a long time. We're reacting. So this is the part of the brain that is like the reaction. So, the issue with the midbrain now is that we necessarily don't have situations where we need it as much as we used to when we were in the wild. I mean, maybe, if somebody throws a ball at your face and you move out of the way, that's the midbrain reacting. You moved before you even thought about it, okay? So that's actually the perfect example. So, but the issue with the midbrain is that our body might see something as a threat, or we might have a memory of something that was a threat. Anything that's like a threat, our midbrain starts to initiate our sympathetic nervous system, and then our heart's racing, and then we're feeling anxiety. And the issue with that is the midbrain, the frontal lobe, they're all connected, right? So when your midbrain is being stimulated more, the blood, the glucose, the nutrients, it's all going to more so that part of the brain, and that's what's taking up the energy. And the issue with that is when that happens, our frontal lobe doesn't get as much stimulation. And the frontal lobe is the place where there is empathy, creativity. It's where we have problem-solving skills. It's like sympathy for others. It really is, the frontal lobe is like, the frontal lobe. But like, it is like the place to be. Like people who have, antisocial personality disorder, a lot of times their frontal lobe doesn't stimulate as much as somebody who is like a highly sensitive person. So that is really, the frontal lobe is the place where we find, enlightenment. Like that is the place to be. So what happens is the prefrontal cortex and this midbrain, it's almost on like a seesaw, right? So when the midbrain stimulation goes up, the prefrontal lobe stimulation goes down. So if we're in this constant state of anxiety, like we can't have, creativity. We can't have empathy for ourselves. We can't have this internal happiness because that is all created in the frontal lobe. The other issue is we cannot have internal happiness without feeling safe. We need a foundation of safety to be able to perceive the world around us in a positive light. So what this means is if somebody at their core does not feel safe, and you may not feel safe because your midbrain stimulation's up and your sympathetic nervous system and everything, if you don't feel safe, you're going to perceive the world around you negatively. You could be having a very positive experience going on around you, and you most likely will perceive that in a negative way. So how do we create a foundation of safety? Well, we have to diminish that midbrain activity because that is what makes us feel not so safe. And when I say diminish midbrain activity, the midbrain is not a bad place, The midbrain is regulating our heartbeat and our breathing and things like that, but it is that fight or flight response, and we don't want that. So, excuse me. So the idea of neurosculpting is almost like a mathematical scientific equation about how we can diminish the midbrain activity in the sense of the fight or flight type of responses, and increase the frontal lobe so that we can get to that place of safety and homeostasis, because you do want some midbrain activity, but, it's important for it to be balanced out. So the first way we can do that is if you're feeling anxious and you are feeling unsafe, they say that a good thing to do, so actually I'll take a step back. So a fun, interesting fact is that if you're having a fight or flight response, right, all of your blood supply, not all of it, but a lot of it starts to get pumped to your external muscles, like in your arms and your legs. And the reason, and for that, and it takes away from your internal organs, is because when you're in the wild and you see the tiger and you need to decide, do I fight or flight, you need to run, you need to fight. Your muscles need to be prepared. So your body is pumping that away from the organs and the brain and things like that to try to get it to those muscles. So one little fun fact is they say if you just like shake it out, that will help to, get the blood moving, the muscles moving, and get that blood back to the organs and things like that. And it helps to just like relieve that tension in your muscles. Because when you're in fight or flight, you're like, oh, you know what I mean? You're tense, you're amped up, you're scared, and you just want to shake it out. So that's like one little like tip, but that's not necessarily part of the equation. But you can start it like that. But the important part that I have found is the first thing to do. So if you're feeling really tense, you can shake it out. After that, it's important to get to a place of safety, to mentally feel safe. And that doesn't mean safe in the sense like, oh, you want to self-harm or something like that. It can just be a feeling of safety, like anxiety and being calm and, something like that. So to get to a place of safety, if you can sit and write on a piece of paper, you can close your eyes and like think about it, but try to list right now in this moment of whatever moment that you're scared or whatever or anxious, in this moment, what makes you feel safe? And that is going to help diminish that midbrain fight or flight. So if I'm all anxious right now, I'm going to start and I'm going to say, okay, I feel safe right now because I have a house that I'm living in that is a safe place. I feel safe because I'm going to have food on the table tonight. I feel safe because, I have money in the bank. I'm financially stable. I feel safe because I have a wonderful family who cares about me. And that's going to really help bring down that activity. So now that your midbrain is lowering down, your prefrontal cortex on this little seesaw is evening out, right? So now what we want to do is we want to stimulate the prefrontal lobe activity. So how do we do that? Well, the prefrontal lobe brings us joy, happiness, empathy, creativity, problem solving. So using the creativity and the problem solving aspect, we can increase that prefrontal lobe activity. So we do that by doing something creative, right? So try painting, drawing. If you're not an artsy person, that's okay. Problem solving, do some Sudoku or word search or some math problems, some homework, and that's going to help bring up that prefrontal lobe. So there's lots of different ways that people like to deal with anxieties, and having internal awareness of what they're dealing with and trying different techniques to try to handle that. I really like this idea of neurosculpting because I very much like math. I like science. I like knowing like A plus B equals C all the time. Like breaking things down into almost like a scientific formula makes it much easier for me to understand. So that's why I'm very interested in this idea of neurosculpting. So I will possibly do another video on this, because I think it's really interesting, and it's something as I learn more, I can share with you guys more. I am not necessarily, a professional of neurosculpting. I haven't studied it for 20 years or anything like Miss Lisa Wimberger, but I find it very interesting, and I've read quite a few of her journal articles, and I would listen to quite a few of her talks, and I think that she is just wonderful, and she has a couple books out that I'm planning on getting. So if this is something that you guys find interesting, let me know, and I'll do some more information on it. But yeah, I just think that this is awesome, so I thought that I would share it with you guys, and make sure, to subscribe to my channel. I will have new videos every week talking about things that I find interesting related to nursing, medicine, psychology, mental health, awareness of yourself, because awareness of yourself and your feelings and you as a person is so important for a happy life, and we're always building and growing and incorporating new techniques and changing certain behaviors to make our life better, because essentially, in my opinion, we all have behaviors that are harmful, and that doesn't necessarily mean physically harmful, like hurting ourselves or having some type of eating disorder or anything like that, but even just the way we deal with stress can be harmful, to ourselves. And, being able to change behaviors, for me, I was not very assertive for a really long time, so this year I made it my goal to be more assertive. So, we find things that we lack at, and we try to change those behaviors to create a better, happier life for ourselves. So that's kind of the idea of my channel, is to just indulge into these scientific thoughts and things to create internal awareness and create a better life. So, all right, thanks guys. Thanks you for tuning in. I'll see you later. Bye.